If you thought a broken sneaker couldn't change a billionaire's heart, you're about to find out how wrong you are. Seattle was waking up under a lazy curtain of mist. The streets gleamed with last night's rain, and the city stretched itself slowly, yawning through the thick morning air. Elon Musk sipped lukewarm coffee inside a discreet bakery tucked between two old brick buildings. His 6-year-old daughter, Nova Musk, stood on tiptoe by the pastry counter, trying to decide between a chocolate croissant or a cinnamon twist. "One for me, and one for somebody else," Nova declared solemnly, pointing at two pastries. Maggie, Nova's nanny, chuckled softly. "Who's the lucky someone?" Nova shrugged. "Dunno yet." Bag in hand, they stepped onto the sidewalk, their shoes clicking against the damp concrete. Elon stayed a few steps behind, pretending not to hover. It was one of those rare mornings without bodyguards, advisors, or conference calls. Just family. Just breathing. They were halfway back to the car when Nova suddenly stopped. "Look," she whispered, tugging Maggie's sleeve. There, sitting half-hidden against a graffiti-stained wall, was a boy. Maybe 15. His jacket was 2 sizes too big, his jeans threadbare, and his sneakers, one bright blue, the other gray and ripped, looked like they'd given up long ago. In his hands was a battered notebook. He wasn't begging, wasn't asking, he was just drawing. Sketching the rainy skyline as if the city itself were a secret only he could hear. Nova didn't hesitate. She marched forward, small boots splashing through a puddle. "Nova," Maggie called cautiously. Elon stepped up beside her, frowning slightly but saying nothing. Nova crouched in front of the boy. "Hi," she said simply. The boy blinked at her, wary but not unkind. "I brought you this," Nova continued, holding out the second pastry. The boy stared at it like she was offering him the moon. "Thanks," he muttered, voice hoarse. Nova grinned. "I'm Nova." "What's your name?" "Jonah," he answered, cradling the pastry carefully, like it might vanish if he wasn't gentle. Behind them, Elon exhaled slowly. He was about to step forward when Jonah's hand slipped, and Elon caught a flash of what he was drawing, not just the city, but broken buildings stitched together with threads of gold. "Where are your parents?" Nova asked innocently. Jonah hesitated. Then shrugged. "Don't really got any." Maggie shot a look at Elon, silent question hanging in the air. "What do we do?" Elon knelt down, meeting Jonah's eyes. "You hungry?" he asked quietly. Jonah shrugged again, but his stomach answered with a low, traitorous growl. Elon stood up. "Come on," he said, jerking his head gently toward the Tesla parked nearby. "We'll figure something out." Jonah hesitated, long enough that Elon almost backed off. But then, maybe because of the way Nova was smiling at him, or maybe because the rain started again in soft silver needles, Jonah stood up. He limped slightly as he walked, his mismatched sneakers slapping wetly against the ground. But he didn't look back. And neither did Elon. The Musk residence in Seattle wasn't as famous as the one in Texas, but it was still impressive, a blend of glass, wood, and steel tucked quietly into the side of a wooded hill. The ride home was mostly silent. Nova chatted to herself about colors and clouds, while Jonah sat stiff and small in the back seat, pastry forgotten on his lap. When they pulled into the long private driveway, Jonah's fingers gripped the seatbelt tight. His body was braced, not for impact, but for rejection. Elon noticed. "You're not trapped," he said casually as he parked. "You can leave any time you want." Jonah didn't respond. His eyes were darting everywhere, measuring exits, calculating escape routes like a kid who had learned not to trust open doors. Inside, Maggie ushered Nova upstairs with promises of a cartoon marathon. That left Elon and Jonah alone in the sun-drenched foyer, awkwardness thick between them. "You want something to eat?" Elon asked. Jonah shook his head, muttering, "Already had the pastry." "You want somewhere to clean up?" A pause. Then a small, reluctant nod. Elon motioned him toward the guest bathroom and set a fresh towel on the counter. Take your time, he said, then closed the door without waiting for thanks. In the hallway, Elon leaned against the wall and exhaled. He didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a social worker. He wasn't a savior. Hell, half the time he wasn't even sure he was a good father. But when he had seen Jonah sitting there in the rain, drawing gold into broken buildings, something inside him had cracked open, a place he thought he'd sealed shut a long time ago. Maybe it wasn't about knowing what to do. Maybe it was about showing up anyway. When Jonah emerged 20 minutes later, he looked different. Not fixed. Not saved. But different. His hair was damp, and his hoodie, now clean and soft from Maggie's quick run to the laundry room, hung differently on his small frame. He carried his notebook under one arm like a shield. "You draw a lot," Elon said as they sat across from each other at the kitchen island, nursing mugs of cocoa. Jonah shrugged. "It's easier than talking." Elon nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah. Talking's overrated." That pulled a ghost of a smile from the boy. "The first real one." "Where you been staying?" Elon asked gently. "Bus station. Construction sites. Sometimes just wherever." Jonah picked at the frayed sleeve of his hoodie. "But it's okay. I'm good at not being noticed." Elon leaned forward slightly. "That's not the same as being okay." Jonah didn't answer. He just stared down at the swirls in his cocoa. Elon let the silence stretch. Let it breathe. Some things couldn't be rushed. Finally, Jonah whispered, "You're not gonna call anyone, are you?" "No," Elon said. "Not unless you want me to." "Why?" Elon thought for a moment, then said, "Because not everybody who falls through the cracks wants to be dragged back out. Some just need someone to sit with them at the bottom for a while." Jonah blinked. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Nobody had ever said it like that before. Nobody had ever asked if he wanted help. That night, Jonah didn't sleep in the guest room. He didn't even make it to the bed. He sat curled up in the oversized armchair in the corner, notebook open on his knees, sketching under the soft glow of a reading lamp. Elon passed by once, on his way to grab a midnight coffee. He didn't disturb him. Didn't offer a blanket or suggest he move. Just left the door cracked open so Jonah could see the hall light, proof that someone was nearby. Around 3 a.m., Jonah's hand finally stilled. He closed the notebook, leaned his head against the back of the chair, and, for the first time in longer than he could remember, slept. Not because he wasn't scared, but because, somehow, this time, he was allowed to be. For a while, it was simple. Jonah stayed. He helped Nova build blanket forts in the living room. He quietly wiped down the kitchen counters after dinner without being asked. He drew in the mornings, usually perched on the back patio where the rising mist made everything seem almost magical. Elon didn't press him for stories. Maggie didn't hover. Nova treated him like he'd always been there. It was fragile, yes, but real. Until the day the world noticed. It started at a local art supply store. Elon had promised Jonah a new sketchbook, the good kind, thick paper that wouldn't tear under heavy pencil strokes. Maggie had driven Jonah and Nova into town. It was an ordinary afternoon. Rain puddles, traffic lights blinking yellow, the smell of wet concrete. While Maggie chatted at the register, Jonah wandered to a clearance table stacked high with notebooks. Nova, in her oversized yellow raincoat, skipped after him, slipping once and knocking over a whole pyramid of paint sets. Jonah caught her, laughing, a real, full laugh that split across his face like the first crack in winter ice. Someone, somewhere in the store, snapped a photo. And by that night, it was everywhere. Who's the boy with Elon Musk's daughter? Is Musk hiding a secret son? Elon Musk's new mystery house guest? Hashtags trended, hashtag Musk mystery, hashtag who is Jonah, hashtag Elon's new family. Jonah saw it on Maggie's phone before she could hide the screen. His face froze. His hands shook. I didn't mean, he started, but the words crumbled halfway out. Maggie crouched down, steadying him. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said fiercely. But Jonah was already retreating inward, faster than any reassurance could reach him. That night, he packed the battered hoodie and the half-filled sketchbook into his old backpack. He slung it over one shoulder and crept down the hallway toward the front door. He didn't get far. Elon was waiting, sitting in the dark on the living room couch, a cup of untouched tea cooling in his hands. "You running?" Elon asked, voice low but not accusing. Jonah froze. "I don't want to make trouble." "You're not." Jonah's grip tightened on the backpack strap. "They're saying stuff. About me. About you. I shouldn't be here." Elon set the tea down and stood up slowly. "Jonah," he said, stepping closer. "The world doesn't get to decide who belongs in this house. But they'll talk. They always do." Elon shrugged. "Let them." Jonah blinked, confused. "You don't care?" Elon's mouth twisted into a sad smile. "Of course I care. But not enough to lose you over it." For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the boy who had been forgotten and the man who had once believed he had no more room in his life for stray souls. And somehow, without speaking, Jonah understood. He didn't have to earn his place here. He already had. But it wasn't easy. The headlines kept swirling. Rumors piled up like junk mail no one could throw away. A blurry photo of Jonah sketching on the patio made its way into a tabloid, with wild speculation attached: abandoned son, genius prodigy, runaway criminal. It was brutal. It was exhausting. And it made Jonah question, again and again, whether staying had been a mistake. Until one evening, sitting by the garden pond, Nova plopped down beside him, clutching a fistful of dandelions. "You're like my brother," she said matter-of-factly, blowing seeds into the evening air. Jonah stared at her. "Brothers don't have to match," Nova added, wrinkling her nose. "They just have to stay." Jonah looked away, blinking furiously at the water. Maybe the world didn't get it. Maybe it never would. But Nova did. And so did Elon. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Jonah didn't vanish. He thought about it, more times than he cared to admit. Each time the news cycle spun a new story, each time a classmate whispered behind his back, each time someone stared too long at the mismatched sneakers he still wore. But he stayed. Not because it was easy. Because for the first time, he had somewhere worth staying. One crisp morning, as mist rolled low across the Musk property, Jonah found himself sitting across from Elon at the long oak table in the sunroom. A soft stack of papers sat between them, untouched. "You ever thought," Elon said, tapping the edge of the pile, "about what it would look like if we built something for kids like you?" Jonah blinked. "Like what?" "Not charity. Not pity. A place where art and tech and stubborn hope could collide. A place for kids who don't want to be saved, just seen." Jonah stared at him. Then, slowly, a smile crept onto his face. "You're serious," he said. Elon nodded once. Dead serious. The idea grew faster than either of them expected. A quiet program. No press releases. No hashtags. Just small grants. Private studios. Scholarships with no essays, no GPA requirements, no stories traded for sympathy. Jonah helped design the first studio space, a converted warehouse on the edge of downtown Seattle, walls covered in chalkboard paint so every kid who walked through could leave a mark. They called it the Nova Project, after the girl who had believed, from the very first day, that a stranger with broken shoes could still be family. On the day of the launch, Jonah stood at the front of the room, hands trembling slightly around a folded piece of paper. The building buzzed quietly behind him, kids sketching, coding, soldering small circuits together like magic. He cleared his throat. "I used to think surviving was the best I could do," Jonah said, voice low but steady. "That disappearing was safer than being seen." A hush fell over the crowd. But someone once told me, he continued, glancing at Elon in the front row, that being invisible isn't the same as being free. He unfolded the paper and read the final line, written in blocky, nervous handwriting. "We are not here to be saved. We are here to stay." The room erupted, not in applause, but in something better, soft, knowing smiles. Nods that said, "We see you. We hear you. We're staying too." Later that evening, Elon found Jonah sitting alone on the rooftop terrace, watching the city lights blink on one by one. "You did good today," Elon said, sitting down beside him. Jonah shrugged. "Still feels scary." Elon smiled faintly. "The right things usually do." They sat in silence for a long time. Then, almost shyly, Jonah asked, if someone wanted to keep getting stronger, inside, what would you tell them to read?" Elon thought for a moment. "2 books," he said finally. "Ones that helped me when I forgot what I was made of." He pulled out his phone and tapped a few notes. "The Obstacle is the Way" by Ryan Holiday. A guide to turning adversity into advantage, built on ancient Stoic wisdom. Not about ignoring pain, but using it as fuel. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. A timeless story about survival, purpose, and the freedom to choose who you become, even when the world strips everything else away. He turned the screen toward Jonah. "Start with those," he said. "Let them wreck you a little. Then rebuild." Jonah smiled. It wasn't wide or showy. It was the kind of smile you could miss if you weren't paying attention. But Elon saw it. Because sometimes, the strongest launches didn't blaze across the sky. Sometimes, they happened quietly. On rooftops. Over cooling mugs of tea. Inside boys who learned, against every odd, that they were never broken. Just waiting for someone to say, "Stay." If Jonah's story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of a part of yourself you thought had been forgotten, maybe it's time to rebuild. Maybe it's time to stay. Start by picking up these 2 life-changing books. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Turn setbacks into your greatest victories. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Discover how even the darkest paths can lead to light. Because you're not invisible. You're just getting ready for your next launch.